Welcome back. Well, I tell you a legend that a soldier in 1949 in the Smoky Mountains encountered a giant from Native American his legend of a Cherokee giant in the Smoky Mountains. Corporal Eli Carter, home on leave, encountered that such thing in the Smoky Mountains. A giant, a Cherokee giant. So let's get to the video, shall we?
Leave, hiking like the doc said. Night 1, the woods go dead quiet. I find six-toed prints, red hair snagged in laurel, and my trip lines tick in order, like someone testing me. The Cherokee Ranger says, I've crossed the wrong line. Fog drops. We hug the creek and ring iron. At Listening Rock, something 10 feet tall steps out, plants a red hand on stone, and says one word I still hear, boundary. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel, and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. Late October 1949. They told me to touch grass. That was the government's fix. A pamphlet from Veterans Affairs with a smiling nurse and a pine tree said, nature helps the nerves. Forest air, fresh water, sleep under stars, bring a tent, breathe, that kind of thing. I'd done worse. I'd slept in a foxhole with rain in my boots and jungle rot chewing my feet in the Pacific. I'd gone 3 days on coffee and spite while a butter bar back on the beach tried to remember which end of a map pointed north. So when I got leave to visit my mother's people near Cherokee, North Carolina, I said fine. I'll hike a couple nights. I'll breeze all the goddamn grass they've got. Ridge light is different here. Soft. Blue in the distance like an old bruise. The Smokies earn their name. The haze hangs and curls between the ridges. Laurel grips the slopes, and the creeks cut cold and fast around stones slick as eels. It's pretty country. Looks harmless until you climb it with a ruck-biting shoulders that already know the drill. I signed the logbook at the ranger station the way they asked. The station was a timber box with a metal sign out front and a porch that felt like it would hold a memory if you pressed your palm to it. A cast iron stove clicked in the corner. The smell was paper and wet wool. The young ranger was Cherokee, same as Mom's cousins, maybe late 20s. Name tag, said Jackson. He wore the hat like he meant it. Where you headed, Corporal? He asked, tapping the log with a chewed pencil. He saw the haircut, the posture. You can smell army on a man even if he's wearing flannel. Up toward the state line, I said. Late loop. Couple nights. Back by Sunday if nothing breaks. You got weather, he said. Maybe a storm Saturday night. Trail's fine, though. Watch the creeks. He handed the log back and nodded toward a rack of pamphlets. You want old stories? There's a tourist map in there talks about the big fella. College professors love it. Sell you a postcard. The what? He half smiled. Judaculla. We say Sewell Kalu. Big fella. Giant. Left his hand on some rock east of here. Folks come from everywhere to see scratches on stone. Call it a petroglyph. Take pictures. Get back on the bus. Buy a coonskin cap. You believe any of it? He shrugged. I believe people like stories better than chores. And I got chores. You watch the weather. He tapped my pack. You're carrying heavy for a tourist. Not a tourist, I said. Just doing what the doc said. Nature's good for most things, he said, signing his own line under mine. Not all things. Enjoy the ridges. He wasn't unfriendly. Just had that ranger way of keeping his real mind behind the eyes. I walked out feeling normal. That's the word. Normal. Like I'd put down the ghosts at the door and picked up a map and a plan. I loaded my ruck with what the quartermaster sold me cheap because it was stamped surplus. Shelter half, wool blanket, mess kit, a couple of sea rations, a little stove to behave if it didn't pour, extra socks, entrenching tool, a length of cord, a tin of coffee, a hand-cranked flashlight that squealed like a toy, and my sidearm, a .45 from the war I wasn't supposed to carry anymore but did. It had weight I trusted. Magnesium fire starter in the top pocket, a little gray bar you could shave with your knife to flare a flame. That, and a notebook in the breast pocket with a stub pencil slid through the spiral. Notes keep a man straight. Notes talk back when your brain tries to lie. I took the foot trail up past an old chestnut stump the size of a wagon wheel, hickory and pine. The air had that cold bite you taste behind the teeth when October wants to make a point. Crows heckled. Squirrels jumped in the duff. I moved like I'd been taught to move, not because I was hunting, just because that's how my legs remembered to walk. Quiet, steady, watch your footing. Don't skyline yourself on a ridge where some farmer with a bottle and a grudge might sight you in. I wasn't in a war anymore, but the body doesn't read the memo. By late afternoon, I hit a little saddle between two knobs, open enough for a tent, near a creek you could hear but not see. I set camp by the book, shelter half-strung low, windward side braced. I scraped a fire ring and set a small flame that wouldn't show from far. Boiled water. Heated beans. Ate slow, listening. Water noise. A woodpecker pecking like a drunk carpenter. Distant elk bugle rolling from down valley. The park had brought them back, Jackson had said, and they liked to sound like haunted bugles in the fog. It made me grin. I wrote the date at the top of the notebook page, late October 1949. I listed the basics like an old sergeant checking kit. Arrived saddle at 1600. Weather fair. Light breeze from west. Creek audible. Tracks of deer on trail. Sign log at station. Cherokee Ranger Jackson. Mentioned tourist story of giant. Shrugged it off. I did too. I put the book away and breathed the smoke and pine, and I felt the war step back another pace. My boots were off. My feet steamed. The sky faded pink and then bruised purple. I lay in the dirt and looked up through bare limbs. It was calm. It was the kind of calm that makes your chest loosen. I thought, hell, maybe the nurse was right. I banked the fire and slid under the shelter. The .45 lay under my glove by habit, not fear. I slept without dreams till the creek changed its voice, and the air turned colder on my cheek, and a late owl started to call out names it didn't own. I woke at dusk like a switch flicked in the back of my head. There's a light the world gets then. Gray soup. Things flatten. Depth gets lost. The owl kept at it, a far, steady hoot from low in the hollow. The kind they put on postcards. Then it broke off the way a man coughs when he sees a shadow move that wasn't supposed to. I pulled on boots and stepped into the trees. The world held its breath. You know that hush when 1,000 small lives all agree something bigger just entered the room? Same thing in the jungle when a patrol stopped because the point smelled cigarette smoke ahead and all the cicadas shut off like a bad radio. It was that. Even the creek sounded like it was trying to be quiet. I went 20 paces and found the first odd thing. Barefoot tracks in black loam where the slope dampens the leaves. Not a man. Big. Too big. The stride was long. The heel dug deep like a weight you don't carry unless you were built to carry it. The toes pressed distinct. Not 5. 6. 6 thick toes, like someone carved them with a spade. No boots, no tread. Naked foot. Who the hell runs barefoot up a mountain in October? You tell yourself it's a trick of the mud. Your mind wants that. I knelt and pressed my palm beside the print. My hand looked like a child's there. I measured with the blade, 13 inches of steel and change. The print laughed at it. Okay, I said to nobody. Some joker with a good story. Fine. Down by the creek crossing where 2 big flat rocks made a hop, someone had stacked stones in a way that wasn't just stacking. Not a cairn. Half a hand. Palm wide, finger short, as if someone had tried to teach the rocks a shape. I touched it and felt nothing but cold. I listened for that owl again and heard it begin and then break into something lower, a chest vibration, like the first wave of a distant shell. Not sound so much as pressure. It made my teeth feel loose. The ranger had joked about Judiculla, Sualkaloo. My mother's aunt used to tell the old winter tales when we visited. She'd talk about a giant who put his hand on a rock and left a sign for men to see. Don't cross. Don't wander. Keep to your side. The old aunt would spit tobacco juice after she said his name and tap iron in the stove with the poker like she was ringing a bell he hated. I hadn't thought of that in years. The memory slid up now, oiled by the print in the stone stack and the way the owl call dropped into my ribs and stuck there. I pushed the thought out. Boar can make a forest scene full of ghosts. They move heavy. They grunt. They break routine. A pile of stones is a pile of stones. The tracks could be a trick of thaw and freeze and a hunter's idea of a joke to get a rise at the station. The mind likes patterns. The war taught me that my mind especially loves to turn shapes in the dark into men with rifles. Good trick when it's true, bad trick when it's not. I went back to camp, Added wood to the coals. Brewed coffee in the little dented pot. The taste was burned penny in heaven. I told myself to be the man I'd learned to be. See? Note. Act only when you must. I wrote in the notebook, slow, printing like a schoolboy so I wouldn't rush my own thoughts. Found barefoot tracks in damp loam. 6 toes. Big. Stone stack in shape of hand near creek hop. Heard owl calls that fell into lower tone. Felt like it in chest. Likely bore wind imagination. Keep eyes open. The forest didn't quite breathe again. Not the way it had. But the fire threw heat. The blanket at my shoulders felt like a promise. I ate crackers and cheese from a ration tin and tried to make my jaw chew normal speed. Twilight bled out. The night wasn't black. It was textured, like a wool blanket. You could see edges if you were patient. The owl started back up. It hooted proper for a minute. Then the note knuckled down into that chest tone and held there like someone pressing a big hand on your sternum and saying hush. I lay with the 45 under my palm and the fire low and the creek arguing softly with its rocks, and I told my own heart to do what it was told. Beat, slow, keep count. Don't let the past write the present. I slept in slices, 10 minutes here, 20 there. Every time I woke, the trees had moved a half-inch closer, and the night had a new smell I couldn't name. Sun took its damn time. When it got around to showing itself, I stepped out and knew someone had touched my place. Not the way a squirrel messes your tin. Not raccoon fingers in the biscuits. This was neat. The ration bag I'd hung up the night before, tied off and slung between 2 saplings to keep it from critters, sat now in the middle of the camp, set down like a lunch pail on a school desk. Not ripped, not gnawed. Ropes undone. Items inside arranged not by weight or sense, but by shape. Cylinders in a row. The spoon placed across the top of the crackers like a little silver bar. My pipe laid over the top like a crosspiece. Every soldier learns to see the small wrongs. This was a wrong. I stood there and didn't move. The forest watched, waiting to see if I'd get the joke. I didn't give it the pleasure. I crouched, checked the edges. No tracks on the pine needles except mine from last night. Whoever did it was light-footed or very careful or both. The creek talked nonsense. I tried to listen past it and got something else. An elk bugle started down hollow, a big bull throwing his voice at the morning just like he ought to. The note lifted, proud as a flag, and then it broke off like a radio unplugged. Not a fade, not an end, a cut. The silence after it was hard as a slap. I felt my mouth go dry. I checked my pistol. Old habit. Slide, chamber, magazine, breath. I knew better than to fire it unless I meant to kill something, but touching it steadied a part of me that needed steadying. Upslope I saw the shape. I saw it because the sun hit it a funny way and the mind catches that. Tall. Taller than tall. A man shaped but stretched. Not one of us. Not in the way it balanced. It held a stick. Not a stick. A spear or a staff. The way the top looked, knotted and heavy. The figure stood still against a hemlock. It could have been a tree at first. Then it moved. A tiny motion, a shift of weight. It tilted its head. That broke me more than the size. The tilt was the way a man tilts when he's measuring you for a suit or a coffin. I licked my lips and raised my hand like an idiot, palm out, trying to look harmless. I had nothing to shout that didn't make me sound like a fool. Poachers, hikers, you don't shout at a shape like that and expect it to answer in English. But my mouth did it anyway, because the human brain wants the world to be the world. Hey, I said, ranger station's down the trail. The shape didn't move. Wind played the hemlock needles behind it, making a kind of whisper. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes proper again, the shape wasn't there. That was worse than seeing it. I wrote it as soon as my fingers would work. Silhouette uphill. Large. Taller than any man I've seen, holding staff or spear. Could be trick of light, could be somebody playing games. Call it poachers. I underlined the word twice and hated myself for it. I didn't believe the line. It felt like lying to a friend. I cleaned camp slow, made noise I meant to make, hung the ration bag back up, this time with the knot a drunk sailor would envy. I whittled a little wedge and jammed it under the knot so it wouldn't slip, unless something with a thumb worked it. It made me feel like I'd done a thing. The day moved quiet. The sun walked out. Shadows got long and lean. myself to pack and move down valley. Maybe swing by the station and make a joke about owls with deep voices. I should have done that. Pride is a dumb animal. Another part of me, the part that spent nights listening to the jungle breathe, said stay. Find out. It's worse to run from a question you can answer than from a bullet you can't. I stayed. Night comes faster when you want a longer day. I didn't build a bigger fire. I did what we did on a perimeter in the islands. I set little trip lines, gut string and tin cans with pebbles. One on the uphill approach, one by the creek path, one near the notch where a deer trail slid under rhododendron. I threaded them low where a cat would duck and a man would forget. I knew the lay now. I could move through it with my eyes crushed closed. The first can whispered at true dark. Not a clatter. A sound like someone teasing a zipper. Then another can farther around. Then another. Not random. Not a curious raccoon tugging and spooking. A sequence. Probe, probe, probe. Whoever was out there liked watching me listen. Okay, I said under my breath. You want to play tactics, big fella? Fine. I moved in a slow circle, keeping the fire at my back, pistol low, safety in my head. I didn't want to shoot. I wanted to understand. The owl made its usual call, then folded it under into that chest tone, the one that felt like standing next to a ship's engine room when the screw bites water. It vibrated the skin. I gritted my teeth to keep them from chattering and felt stupid about it. It wasn't cold. A branch snagged my sleeve. I turned to free it and saw the hair. Red, coarse, longer than any buck I'd ever dragged. It clung to the laurel like a long woman's hair caught in a comb, only thicker, wiry, with a curl I didn't like. I wound it around my finger and it resisted, springy. The color in the firelight looked like rust. I pocketed it like evidence and hated that I did. Down by the creek, the handstones now had a companion. A big flat stone nearby held scratches and old lichen. You don't find fresh carved marks in moss country by accident. These were triangles in rows, 2 rows. Sharp, little teeth shapes, chewed into the stone like someone wanted to draw a mouth that would eat the earth. The handprint scratched in, spread big as a serving platter. The new marks cut bright, raw rock exposed, no weathering yet. I ran my finger over one triangle. The edge bit like a new file. My notebook got the list, faster now, writing ugly. Trip lines triggered in sequence, deliberate. Found red hair, coarse, long, in laurel. Stone by creek with handprint and fresh scratches, triangles in 2 rows. Matches old talk of 2 rows of teeth. Feeling watched. Owls calling wrong. The mind plays games when it knows its prey. I started to smell the jungle again. Diesel and salt, rotting palm fronds. I started to hear the click of a safety off behind a vine curtain, but there was no vine here. Just rhododendron leaves squeaking as fog stroked them. My chest went tight the way it did when a patrol guide froze and you waited, and seconds became teeth that bit you one by one. The can stopped talking. The creek took up the slack. I stood still so long my ankles shook. I wanted to call out again, but calling out gives your breath away. The night let out a breath I didn't know it was holding. When I finally sat down, I did it with a slow exhale and the feeling a man gets when he leans on a rotten rail that holds one more minute just for him. I scraped magnesium into a little pile on a lint of birch bark and sparked it. The flash was a white screen that made the trees blink. It comforted me in a mean way. Fire is honest. Fire says I am here. Behind me, a pebble ticked. I turned fast enough to make my neck crack and saw nothing but the idea of something. The can lines lay slack now, neatly coiled, as if a thoughtful host had tidied before bed. Enough, I said, and the air took the word and filed it under, "We'll see." I met Willani the next day. He walked into my camp like a black bear on a mission. Quiet, good feet, eyes forward, but not too forward. Late 50s maybe, weathered like barnwood. He wore the ranger hat and a coat older than I was. His hair was gray at the temples and black as creek water everywhere else. He had a walking staff that wasn't a stick you pick up on the trail. It was iron or rod with a twist in it and a little bell of steel welded to the top like a simple cap. It tapped stones like it used to tapping stones. He stopped short of the fire ring and took me in. The can lines, the neatness of things, the way I wasn't standing full up. A man in the business knows another man in the business. You're the corporal, sign the book, he said, voice low. Not slow. The bowels held mountains. Carter, I said. Eli. You must be Ranger. Wolani, he said. Thomas. I took the Ridge Trail this morning and saw what I saw. He pointed with his chin at the hair tucked in a crack of bark where I'd wedged it with my knife. You think you want answers. I think you want your pack on and your boots pointed toward town. I saw someone, I said, up the slope. Tall, holding a spear or something. He nodded once, like a teacher who hears you say a math problem out loud and it equals something he hates. You've gone where you shouldn't. I didn't like the phrase. It's the kind of thing a priest says at a funeral. The station ranger Jackson said the old stories are for tourists. Jackson does his job, he said. His job is paper and people with cameras and making sure a boy from Atlanta doesn't freeze his ass off pretending he's Daniel Boone. My job is here. He tapped the ground with the iron staff. The note rang dull and then chimed. The hair on my forearms rose like a mess inspection. You believe in the big fella, I said. I said it like it was a joke. It wasn't. I believe you, he said. And I believe my grandfather. And his grandfather. The rock down east with the scratches? The tourists get a signboard. Professors with neckties point at lines and make sounds. They say migration routes. They say maps of old fields. They say a calendar or some such. My people say a hand. A hand pressed hard. You feel it in your ribs if you're close and it's fog. That's what we say. That the big fella put his mark down and told men what's his. Boundary, he said. Only word he ever uses for us. You see how the writing on that rock looks like claw marks? That's because he has 2 rows of teeth, and he smiles at stone when he says boundary. That's what my grandfather told me for winter stories. I didn't laugh then. I don't laugh now. The infrasound memory made my chest itch. He said the word, to some, Wolani said, in fog. In a low place where water runs slow and rock remembers things. If you hear him say it, you went too far. He doesn't like iron on iron. He doesn't like it a lot. He hates the ring of it. It puts needles in his eyes. He avoids crossing running water if there's fog. Not always. Not never. But he avoids. Fog bothers him. Running water confuses his step. That's what the old folks say. I looked at the iron staff. You carry that for the ring. I carry it because my father did, he said, and because it works. We had hikers go missing last year on this side. 2 men. College boys. Authorities called it exposure. You know that word, soldier? It's a word white papers like when they want a mother to nod and go home. I know the word. I felt my face do the thing it does when anger is an old friend you hate. You think, I think, he said. You and me are here now and not yesterday, and the wind says fog by dark, and your little lines with cans say he's walking the edge to see where you end. So we end where he doesn't like. He pointed with the staff toward the creek. Ridge to ridge, keep close to water. Never cross a hollow at the low. Stay high until you hear water, drop fast, then walk it. If you see a place the rock leans out like a big ear, we call that listening rock. You do not stand under it and sing. You move past and you put iron on iron as you go. You're telling me to retreat. I'm telling you to be alive tomorrow. You've been hunted before. Your feet talk like it. He looked at my sidearm and didn't say a thing. I liked him for that. Jackson said these stories are for tourists. I muttered again, like a fool. Have it. Maybe if I said it enough, the facts would get polite. Jackson has to sleep in a house with a wife who doesn't want him talking in his dreams, he said. Come on, Corporal. You can write your notes on the way. We moved. Ridge to ridge. The sun hauled itself across the sky, and clouds stacked over the high blue like a slow brawl. Wolani set a pace that was a whisper faster than comfortable. He never stepped on dead branches. He never brushed laurel loud. When we crossed a place where the stones lay in a jumble like old teeth, he tapped the iron staff against the trail sign bolted to a post, and the note jumped up and slapped the trees. He smiled that same knot smile and kept going. Behind us, somewhere in the green, something the size of a problem you can't lift moved with us. The storm didn't break like a drum. It slid in slow and mean. Fog came first, rolling up the hollows like a thing that forgot its shape. It wrapped our legs. It reached for our belts. The air got heavy and tasted like a key held under your tongue. We kept to the creek. It was a good creek. It punched over stones and argued with itself and soothed me in a way I remembered from places where the only honest sound is water on rock. Every so often, when the timber cramped down on us, we'd step to a steel marker. The park boys loved their signs, and Milani would ring his iron on it. First touch was thud, second was sing. He hit it until the iron gave a voice you could tell was pain to somebody with ears for pain. The fog twitched when the note walked in. The chest weighed. The infrasound came at odd times, not always tied to the ring. Once it rolled through without any call before it, and both of us bent forward like a gust had leaned a hand on our sternums. He didn't say a word. I didn't either. Near midnight, we found our gear gone. Not the things on us. The things hung in camp where we'd stopped at a bend. We'd set the shelter, built a low smoker fire, and laid out a plan for the early dark. We went for water and came back to nothing but the idea of a camp. The shelter, the blanket, the rations, gone. The fire still smoldered. No tracks, no drag marks. Just one thing left on the cleared earth. Everything stacked neat in the print of a hand. Flat stones arranged like a palm. Our kit laid on the stones in shape of fingers and thumb. My pistol magazine spare, thank God, sat like a nail in the middle as if to say, see, I know it hurts. I didn't fright easy. Men have tried. Shells have tried harder. But this was a different cut. It wasn't a scare. It was a message. And messages do worse things to the spine than bullets. Bullets end a man. Messages make him end himself if he reads them wrong. We didn't shout. Shouting is wind you might need. We looked at each other like men in a trench look when they hear a tank track chew dirt not their own. Then we picked up what we could carry and moved. The fog thickened. It rose. It tasted like iron filings. It made my skin think of old scars. The chest sound, call it a bellow, call it an engine idling behind a wall, rolled again, closer. The creek kept faith. It chattered against shards. It threw small water on our boots. It marked our road like a friendly ghost with a lantern. At some point we noticed the hand signs, not carved, arranged. Fern fronds laid palm out on stones. Sticks laid across log-like fingers. Mud swiped on a trunk in the shape a child would make for a turkey hand at school. Every mark said the same thing to a heart willing to read, boundary. Listening rock came on us like a stage you didn't ask to enter. The slope pulled back to show a great slate ledge leaning out over the creek, a black ear listening to a whisper you couldn't hear. The fog pooled under it, thick as milk. The rock had a face if you let yourself see it, the way boulders do when boys dare each other to look too long. The teeth triangle scratched into a smaller slab nearby looked fresh again, bright as bone. I wrote by feel, quick, while Milani stood with the iron and watched the fog think. My pencil bit the page. Fog deep. Chest voice. Voice. Gear moved and arranged in handprint. We are being pushed. Pattern leads to listening rock. 2 rows teeth, glyph fresh again. Red hair earlier, still in pocket. Not superstition. Not alone. Not bore. Keep water. I put the book away. We walked onto the flat under the rock and the air pressed down like it wanted to be stone. He came out of the fog like a mountain standing up. The size is the first lie your brain tries to tell you. It wants to call everything a man because a man knows what to do with a man. This wasn't that. 10 feet easy, maybe more. Not fat, not lumpy like a carnival giant. Built like a wrestler between rounds, long and thick and braided with rope muscle that didn't mind being cold. Skin pale as old pork fat with scars like whip marks crossing it in maps I couldn't read. Hair red that looked like rust when wet, braided in lines that fell over one shoulder like a horse's mane. Eyes deep set, brows heavy, nose broad and flat like it had been broken and never had the decency to heal straight. And the mouth. God help me. 2 rows of teeth, little triangle knives set like a shark's, the back row peeking when the front row smiled, the gums scar pale around them. He smiled like a man showing you a box of tools. He had a spear. The head was stone, a napped blade bigger than any knife I'd seen in a museum, lashed to a shaft with something that wasn't sinew and wasn't rope. In his other hand he held a club, just a length of wood knotted at one end, dark with old work. He moved it on his palm like a man chooses the weight that feels right in a fight. He didn't rush, that's what hurt most. Men rush, animals rush. He did not. He stepped onto the slate at the edge of the creek, stayed just on his side of it, and looked at us the way you look at ants arguing over a sugar cube. The fog swelled. The chest noise rolled from him, or behind him, or from the rock itself. My ribs crammed. "Boundary," he said. The word wasn't a shout. It was a drop of iron into a bowl. It echoed off the ledge and hit the water, and came back up cold. My ears rang with it. I felt my bowels twitch. I didn't move. I couldn't do much but hold still, and remember how to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth like a drill sergeant stood behind me with a stick. "Boundary," he said again, and the second time the teeth rows showed, and the fog seemed to draw toward his mouth like he was an engine pulling in air to feed itself. The spear tip drifted an inch, just an inch, like a promise. "Now," Willani said, so small a word I almost missed it. I didn't miss what he did. He lifted the iron staff and banged it against the steel signpost bolted to the trail marker on the rock's far side. The first hit thudded. The second sang. The third screamed. It was not a sound the forest wanted. It was a sound like a train inside a tunnel when you stand where you shouldn't. It drilled inside your teeth. It put needles in my eyes. It did worse to him. He flinched. The giant's head jerked like he'd taken a rifle butt under the jaw. The spear tilted down. The club lifted as if to swat the air itself. He took a step back without meaning to, footheel finding the edge of the slate. The fog wavered. I saw a flash of his face, not as a legend, but as a thing in pain. And my pity died on the vine, because pity doesn't help when a mouth like that decides what you are. I stripped the magnesium bar with my knife, shaved curls into a little pile in my palm, fished the striker, sparked. The flare took like a fuse kissed by a match. Magnesium burns white and mean. It's a piece of sun falling in your lap. I threw the flame low and hard at his feet. It hit wet rock, spat white stars, and howled like it wanted a war. He recoiled. The front row of teeth showed like a grin cut with a razor. The light made his eyes look the pale of a blind fish. He put the spear across his face and the club up to guard his ear, human as any boxer for one clear second. The water saved us more than the fire did. He hated the rain. The iron on steel made his shoulders bunch each time like he couldn't help but flinch. But it was the creek that really pricked him. He didn't cross it. He stood right at the lip. He planted his free hand on the face of the big stone that made the near bank, spread his fingers wide as a plate, and pressed. When he lifted it away, the print stayed. Not blood, not paint. Something red that sat on stone like a stain that chose to be there. The sight of that hand burned itself into my sleep for years. The fingers were long. The palm was a pad like a cat's, but human too. The lines cut into it were patterns like the old rock down east, but new. The fog took the smell up, copper and something rotten sweet. "Boundary," he said a third time, and the word shuddered under the rock and up through my boots and into my knees. "Back," Willani hissed. He hit the sign again, and again, iron punishing iron. Music a drunk blacksmith would write. I found a second wad of magnesium shaving and flared it. It was brighter than the first, and it painted everything in sun. The giant's skin looked almost translucent, blue veins like river maps under it. The scars crossed in bands that made my mind think of fences. He didn't flee. He didn't charge. He did something worse. He stepped sideways, stalking the line where stone met water, using the spear to tip testing at the riffle, keeping his hand on the rock as he moved like a man who wants to keep sending a message through the wall to whoever listens beyond. He kept that hand gliding, and the red smeared and printed again and again. His feet never quite met the creek. Even when fog curled thick at the water and would have hidden a crossing, he avoided it with care like a man avoids a live wire. He spoke once more, softer, maybe to himself, maybe to the rock. "Boundary." I took one step forward without knowing I would, anger getting ahead of sense. It happens, and he turned his head toward me so fast I saw the world bend. The spear tip dipped. A hiss came out of him I felt in my knee bones. If he'd committed 1 ounce more weight, we were meat. The only thing that held him was his own rule, and the sound of iron driving nails through fog into his skull. He followed rules. Soldiers know the kind. He was old soldier of this ground. He had his orders, hold the line, and he wasn't about to break them for scraps. Back, Wolani said again, firm now, and I let anger go like a hot rock. I step back, slow, showing hands, keeping shoulders square because showing fear to a thing that tests your edges isn't smart. We edged along the face of listening rock, never turning our backs, the creek to our left, the iron ring, my little sons popping and dying on the slate. The fog flowed with us. The mouth of the giant tracked us like a spotlight. We reached the bend where alders hid the view. The iron sang once, twice, thrice.
I'm gonna correct what my grandpa told me and my Uncle A told me, my cousin Bobby and my Uncle Bubba told me about this legend. He's an old spirit. He was one of the oldest Cherokee gods, Cherokee that lived. He was a giant. But he said boundary because that's his home. The mountain, Smoky Mountain is his home. If you cross that boundary, he has the right to kill you. Because he's old school. He didn't kill you who you were or what you were. In his mind, you're enemy of his place and his boundaries. So yeah. Have a nice day.